Hey there, Magic in the Room listeners. Before we get started with today's episode, I wanted to let you know about an opportunity to get a Magic in the Room hat. Yes, you heard me correctly, a free Magic in the Room hat. Well, it's not really free. You have to do a survey first. Go to magicintheroom.com. We have a survey there. Should just take a few minutes. We are looking for information from you about what you like about the podcast, what you wish we would do differently, and would just love to hear any other ideas that you have. So again, magicintheroom.com. Give us some information and feedback. We will mail you a hat. It's going to be awesome. And let's get to today's episode.
Magic is found in every room where people connect over a shared purpose. In this weekly podcast, Luke, Hannah, and Chris explore the role of purpose, courage, mindset, and culture in every leader's quest for transformational performance.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Magic in the Room podcast. I'm Luke Freeman.
I'm Hannah Bratterud.
And I'm Chris Province. Thank you guys for tuning in. And today, man, special episode. It's going to be a fun one. I look forward to learning more about you guys. And also, I think as we work through our podcast, we really like to just inspire with the questions and, try to put, tactics out there to learn about other people. And that's what our question of the days are intended to do. But I think today's episode is just going to be one big question of the day. And, I really want to know, let's rip off the 5 coolest things we've ever done. And I think that's going to give me some insight to who you guys are. Maybe we'll learn something new about one another and maybe some things we don't want to know. So let's think about it. So I've asked you guys before we showed up today, and we haven't seen each other's list, to let's bring this to the table and let's talk through them. So one, before we get into that, what was the experience of putting the list together and taking the actual inventory?
Yeah, pretty interesting. I did it pretty quickly, just top of mind stuff, because I thought, well, if it's top of mind for me, it's probably the coolest things I've done. But then I looked at it and I was like, all of these are kind of extreme things. Mm-hmm. And the theme really emerged for me, oh yeah, well, I don't consider anything done until I've completely overdone it to its limit. So, yeah, that was kind of interesting and fun to look at it from that lens.
Yeah. Hannah, what about you?
Yeah, kind of similar. I did top of mind and also saw a theme that emerged, the things that when I, just gut feeling of the coolest things I've done. And of course, my over-analyzing mind then starts thinking, oh, but there are other things that are really cool that I've also done, and started to want to dig a little deeper. But the things that really rise to the surface have this ongoing theme of adventure. Those are the things that just always stand out in my mind, that I always remember, stories I tell, and that, I think are part of my identity.
That's awesome. My process is I try to keep a running list of these things. So as I experience things in life, I have the coolest things list, or actually it's titled Amazing Things in my inventories. So anytime I experience something, I say, man, that's one of the coolest things I've ever done. I jot it down on that list, and it's just something I can always go back to and throw a little gratitude towards, and then maybe it inspires me a bit to try to find that next moment or that next thing. I was also taken by what didn't make the list, and I think so that was an interesting piece for me, because obviously you have to cull the herd a bit. So to kind of preface everything, we kind of said, well, this isn't about the day we got married or the day we got divorced, depending on the situation. This is really just things we've experienced and things we kind of take inventory of and say, that was pretty cool.
When our kids were born,
right?
Things like that.
Yeah, because when we do this in workshops, when we ask this story, so a lot of times in workshops, one of the things I'll do is I'll say, amongst your table, share with your table the top 2 or 3 things that you've ever done. But we have to take getting married and having kids off the table, because that's what the room would be filled with. The idea is to get to know each other. So without further ado, how do we want to do this? We want to rip off all 5 and then let the other 2 pepper questions, or do we want to go one at a time around the table?
Let's do one at a time around the table.
One at a time around the table.
Marinate each one.
Are you guys have yours in order, coolest to
No.
to 5th coolest? Okay.
Mine are a little bit chronological because that's how my mind works.
Yeah, and mine are just on there. So let's just dig through, and without form or function, here we go. So Luke, kick us off.
Okay. Number 1 on my list was I had the opportunity in Peru to do what's called the Santa Cruz Trek. And so it's in the highlands of Peru, in the Andes, and in Huanchaco area. And I don't remember exactly how long it is, somewhere between 15 and 20 miles, I think, although it's in kilometers there. So I get really confused really quickly. But the highlight of that is it goes over a pass that's over 15,000 feet in elevation, which is the highest I've ever been hiking. So it was really cool, really beautiful. Yeah, highest elevation I've ever been. We did it in 3 days, I think. So 2 nights and 3 pretty long days. It takes a while to get there. So you're riding these, what are called combi bus, a little public transport thing, up into the mountains on really terrifying roads to get to even the trailhead.
You might make it, you might not.
Yeah. And you're in the back, and it's a, Ford Astro van or whatever, and there's 15 people in it.
Nice.
So, yeah, and your backpack's strapped to the top somehow, and you're just hoping that it's going to be there whenever you get out. So, yeah, it's really amazing thing. I got to do it with a friend of mine named Jack, and we were down there for some other things, a project we were doing, and decided to stay for an extra week. So went high, got acclimated to elevation, and then went on this trip. It was awesome. Got to see some wild chinchillas, saw some condors flying around, and then a lot of cows and llamas and whatever else that are along the trail. So
you could have brought back 2 chinchillas and bred them and made $1 million.
They're pretty hard to catch.
I've never actually seen one in the wild, so I don't have any idea how fast they are.
Yeah, well, they live in rocks. They live all around these boulders, so they can jump under there into their burrows really quickly. So, yeah.
Very cool.
So was that, how long was that trek?
I think it was, somewhere between 15 and 20 miles.
Gotcha.
I think so, yeah.
How many days?
3.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's slow enough where you got to actually take it all in.
Yeah. I mean, the first day you're really, you're spending half the day getting to the trailhead.
Gotcha.
And then the second day is really the hardest because you're going up over the pass. And so, but yeah, totally doable in that amount of time.
Awesome.
Cool.
Hannah, what's first on your list?
Well, first on my list is actually moving to the States.
Oh, yeah.
Not that there weren't cool things that happened in my life prior to that, but moving from Oslo, Norway to Tulsa, Oklahoma at the mature age of 21, I think I just turned 21. And I still remember I had this notebook. I think I still have it, but I remember writing a journal entry in pencil. I used to only write in pencil, so it's barely legible anymore. But I remember just writing down my thoughts of that experience. I was sitting on the plane by myself, had one blue suitcase. That was the only thing I brought.
Wow.
And here we are, some 20 plus years later, and I'm sitting here in Tulsa, Oklahoma today. So that's, not where I live anymore, but that's where I arrived. But that whole journey started in my mind when I was 4 years old and looked up at my dad and said, "Daddy, I'm going to go to school where you went to school," which was Oral Roberts University in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So for any of our listeners that live in Tulsa or that have visited, it's this like space age inspired campus from, the 60s architecture. And so when I was 4, I had no concept of what it looked like or what it was. I just wanted to be like my dad. And then when I was 10, my parents took me on a trip to the States, and we traveled across the US, visited lots of different television studios, actually. I kind of grew up in a TV studio, more or less. And so we were visiting all these different TV stations across the US. And we made a stop in Tulsa and visited the campus. And that was the second time I remember, as I looked around this campus and I was like, this is cool. Yeah. I'm 10.
Big towers.
Yeah. I look up at my dad again and he says, Daddy, this is where I'm going to go to school.
That's awesome.
It all starts in the mind.
Yeah.
For me, when something gets stuck in my head, it may not happen tomorrow, but someday, maybe 10 years later, eventually I'll get there.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Just as we started rolling on this, like, I'm remembering 3, 4, 5 things, are coming into my mind. And so I'd encourage our listeners too, like, as we're going through this exercise, like, take your own journey and think to where you've been. And because I do think all these things create amazing gratitude. But my ask, like, Hannah, have you transposed that letter that's in pencil to like digital form?
No, I haven't. And as I'm telling the story, I'm trying to think, search in my mind of where that notebook is. I know I've held on to it. I've moved a few times, so I want to find it and capture those notes, before it's gone. Because I don't remember exactly what I wrote, but I do remember it was this profound experience of, sitting alone on this plane and just moving my life across the ocean and not knowing that I was never going to return, right? I mean, I go back and visit Norway, but I have lived permanently in the U.S. ever since.
Yeah. Well, I think that's, I don't know, if I was ever going to ask for a gift from you, I would love to see that in some sort of blog post or sharing that with the world, because I think that's an incredible story. And I think about the courage and the wonder and just kind of sitting on that plane and not really knowing like what's in store.
Yeah.
Because the thought of something and the experience of something can be so different. And,
yes.
Well, I'm glad that that's the decision you made, though. So.
I think what's really cool about that is, you think about that story, and I think it's really tempting to think about like the naivete of that, 20-year-old Hannah, and, what is it going to be like to live in another country? And wow, here we are 20 plus years later, and all the things that person didn't know. But it's cool to me to think about we're all kind of on that plane every day. And like, there's some things we think we know, but if we could kind of hold on to that sense of adventure, like tomorrow could be something completely different.
Yeah.
That's kind of fun. So thank you. That's a good story.
Yeah.
How about you, Chris?
Growth. I'm going to go with a growth mindset experience. I cut my teeth in the gaming business in poker and table games. And as part of that, you guys know, I love to gamble. I'll gamble on anything, right? I know what the odds are and I still do it. So I think my high openness shows up in a lot of places in my life, right? So I'm open to know those experiences. But the idea is, if you're going to gamble, you really shouldn't be bad at it. And so I was in a situation where I got to learn how to play poker from literally the best poker players in the world. And I started to apply that. And it's a game that it's expensive to get the experience. Once you have the experience, you have some level of mastery and can perform pretty consistently. But that kind of tipped for me when I made a final table at a World Series of Poker event, and competing against the best in the world and getting there. I totally flipped out, after it was finally down to those 10 players. I think I went in with something, it was basically an insurmountable chip lead that I managed to donk off. But it taught me a lot. It's one, that feeling of making it like to the final table or getting to the playoffs, or now you're playing for the thing that matters most. That is like, to actually win, I really believe any team or person has to grow into the actual win, because processing that next level, that, hey, I'm now playing for the really important thing, but just almost being in disbelief or being naive, like I was in no way prepared to actually win, because the other people at the table had won before. Yeah. I'm just the kid from out of the blue that showed up with a monster chip lead. So it was like the dynamics of that, and I remember feeling like this sense of accomplishment because I had made the final table and totally lost that cutthroat instinct that it takes to actually win. So I was just playing, hey, we're all having a good time, and ended up finishing third, I think.
Wow.
But it was...
Wait, so is this like good. On ESPN4 on YouTube somewhere?
No, it was a circuit event in Tunica. So it wasn't like the bright lights and whole cameras like they have there. But definitely it was an event that had the best players on planet Earth were there. Wow. And for those 2 days, I was one of them. And, I think my world ranking, the highest I ever got was like 234th, right? So at one point, I was the 234th best player in the world, in addition to being a podcast host. So you guys can imagine how hard it is for me to get to the grocery store and back in 20 minutes.
I mean, you must just be inundated.
It's tough being me. So.
Speaking of tough being me, you're over there talking about all of these like growth mindset and lessons learned, and I'm just totally distracted because I want to know like your hat and sunglasses strategy. No sunglasses? Okay.
Yeah, but I'm a nervous person, so like I use my own nervousness as a manipulation thing, because man, if I've got a big hand, like I start shaking because like I know what it can mean. Like I can drag down a big pot. So also when I'm bluffing, I can basically work myself up to the same frenzy to get the same physiological response. So, and you're playing with the same group kind of in and out for a couple, 3 days.
Yeah.
So, they'll know like, hey, if this dude's shaking, like lay your cards down. And so I'll play really tight over the first half of the tournament. And every time I shake, I'll show my cards. So then when we get to the back half of the tournament and it's harder basically to hold on to your chips and the game moves a lot faster, I can basically make some moves with bluffs by basically psyching myself out and up.
You're basically
so that
like
I have the same twitch.
Like the tack in the shoe thing.
Exactly. So, but yeah, I don't do the sunglasses or hats or anything. I'll leave that to the other cats.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Wow. All right, this is my favorite episode.
So far. And then I took all the money I won and I dunked it off on the craps game before I even got out of the casino.
Great.
So,
well done.
Zero-sum game.
I would say you won though because you have a pretty cool story.
It was good. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
All right, my next.
Yeah. Let's keep going.
All right, so my next one that I thought of was, a lot of people have done this. Any given group of folks that you're in, if there's someone who has cycled at some point in their life, a lot of people have done what's called a century, which is a 100-mile bike event. And for novice cyclists, a lot of people have this goal to do a century in under 5 hours, which means that you do it on average 20 miles an hour or faster for the entire event. And so I did that one time. I was able to do a century in under 5 hours and took a lot of practice. And I don't know why I like those long events. I've not, stayed in the cycling world very well or very much the last few years, but there was a time that I enjoyed riding a lot. But for whatever reason, I think it's the pain component. Like, it is just an exercise in suffering at some point. And I don't know what it is about that. Like, finishing a five hours of misery, which granted the first 3 hours aren't very miserable. Like, you're in a big group typically, a lot of drafting, a lot of strategy. Like, do I go with this group that's at a faster pace and draft with them for a while to improve my time? Do I stay with a group that's doing a more like reasonable pace for your level of fitness so you can, conserve energy for the second half of the race? Like, that's kind of the first 30 miles for me anyway. And then, or the first probably, 60 miles or so, 60, 70. And then those last 20, 30 miles, like, they're just painful. Like, the group has usually thinned out quite a bit. You find yourself by yourself. So any crosswind, any headwind, like, is a really big deal. And then it's just painful. So you get to the finish line and it's like people are falling over, or they're just going and standing under a sprinkler, or they're going to a medical tent or whatever. And I don't know why, like, I just like it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It feels good to have that accomplishment under my belt. I would like to do it again. It takes a lot of time, like, just to dedicate to be able to do those distances. Like, you have to be riding probably an hour a day or 2 hours a day, 3 days a week, and then do like a 4 or 5 hour Saturday ride for several months leading up to it. And man, that's hard to commit to. But one day.
Wow. Pardon me. So, and I get you said, hey, I'm not engaged in cycling, but what I do see as a theme for you is, like, you're in the endurance business. Like, your ability to say, hey, I want to master that thing, and then really becoming, like, just submissive to that discipline until you have mastery. Like, that's what I see from you just time and time again, regardless of what the skill is. So in that season, it may have been cycling, but as you go through different seasons, I think that's a really strong theme for you.
Yeah, that's interesting. The thought that came into my mind was, well, that says a lot about Luke if one of the coolest things I've ever done is suffer for 5 hours, because that's how you described it. It's like, I really like it. Like, it's just miserable, and you're just suffering for 5 hours, and it's so cool.
Yeah, that's leadership, right? Lean in.
Yeah, and I don't know what it is, but it's like when you get to that last 20 miles, it really is like a mental game, because, you might be getting a leg cramp, or you might be stuck out there on your own or whatever. And it's like, well, do I keep going or do I take a break? Because every 10 miles, probably there's a break station. They have water, they have chairs, they have food. Like, and you could always just pull over if you're hurting. Like, no one's making you do it except for yourself. And so this, like, do I want this enough to, like, that next pedal stroke, keep doing it? Or, like, if one leg's cramping, like, have the other leg do the work for 5 miles to give the cramping leg. Like, it's just, I don't know. I don't know. Something about the test of will thing is really engaging to me.
Yeah, and as I've, and I haven't done any cycling, but as I've started exploring long distance running over the last couple of years, right, and also read a lot about, the brain and how we're wired. Humans really evolved to be long distance athletes. The way we're built, the way our brains work, there's a lot of things in our physiology that is really set up for that, right? But until we cross certain barriers, we don't know that, right? Because everything in our brains is going to tell us that you're going to surely die if you do this, if you keep going right now, because this feels terrible. And yet, if we keep going, there's like an internal reward mechanism that happens, right? And we get this sense of euphoria and accomplishment and, like, feeling really great even after a lot of pain and misery, which is what kind of keeps us excited about it and doing it again.
Yeah.
But I do think there's definitely analogous to leadership and to accomplishment in general, right? If you are able to endure past when it gets painful.
Yeah, I think courageous leaders are comfortable being uncomfortable. And there's this idea that, it's just drenched in accountability. Like, I know that I didn't promise anyone else that I wouldn't pull over. But as I was working leading up to this thing, I didn't prepare with the intention of pulling over.
Right.
I prepared with the intention of finishing. And so it's not that I promised anyone else, it's that I promised me, and to be accountable to those commitments we make to ourselves. I think that's the power in that story.
Yeah. All right, so my next cool thing is, it's kind of maybe two things. It's 2 summers of traveling through Central Europe. The first summer I spent on a boat traveling down the Danube River, starting in Salzburg and making stops every 1 to 2 days in different cities and along that river. And some of the most incredible cities in Central Europe are located along that river, like Budapest and Brno in the Czech Republic, and a few places that were just stunning, right? And so that experience led to me going back the second summer and spending several weeks in the Czech Republic. And I fell in love with Prague. And this was when I was probably 19, I think. And so I had this, and I met a girl on that trip that became a good friend who invited me back in the fall. So for fall break, I'd gone with my German high school class to Berlin, and I stayed. The next week was fall break. So instead of going back with my class, I traveled back to Czech Republic and stayed with her and her family for a week. And I was strongly considering studying in Prague and going to school in Prague. So the summer when I was 20, about to turn 21, or that spring, I was really weighing the 2 options. Door number 1, Prague in the Czech Republic. Door number 2, Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Golden Driller, Praying Hands.
JJKL.
Iconic landmarks. And here I am sitting in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and some days I wonder, what would my life trajectory look like if I had chosen door number 1?
Sure. And it's crazy, those keystone moments, those forks in the road. What happens if I pick a different university? What happens if I go into a different line of study? What happens if I don't meet this person? All that is just amazing to think about, where we are versus where we could be. And the idea is to never look back with regret, right?
Yep.
We make the choices we make, and, be resilient about our purpose going forward, and wherever we are, the idea is to move to where we want to be. So,
yeah.
And I don't think we're ever too mature to correct any decision mistakes, right? So if we make a low quality decision, rewind, reset, relaunch.
Yeah.
Or write that alternate story.
Right.
I've thought about that too. Maybe that's my first novel.
Right. There you go. Yeah. You can always go there. Yeah. Play it all the way out.
Yeah.
Certainly. Coolest things I've ever done. I'm going to go with a different type of endurance feat. You spoke to all those landmarks about Tulsa. Well, the other thing is we have the largest winter indoor racing event here, and it's sprint cars, and it's called Chili Bowl, right? And so every winter, all the racers from around the country come in, and they have this huge event at Expo Square. The thing about it is, let's say there's 15,000 people there. I don't know the number, but regardless of the number, 85 to 90% of them are men. So the title of this story is "The Day I Peed My Pants at Chili Bowl Just a Little Bit." Okay. So, we know it's Chili Bowl week. It's a big thing. There's signs at the airport and the whole nine. And, the idea is you get off work and you go straight to Chili Bowl. Like, do not pass go. Like, your day starts because, those heat races start at like 5:30. So over the course of the night, you're having beers, doing racing things, and you tend to get a little full, and the bathroom lines are super long. So effectively, I'm sitting there in the stands, and I realize, like, I've got to pee. And if you're sitting in the stands when you realize that, you're already out of luck because the line to the bathroom is about 200 people deep.
Dang.
So I'm standing in the back of the line and, craning my neck, looking how many people I'm counting, how many people, calculating how many minutes it's going to be before I get to the front.
Oh.
And I realize there's no way. Like, I can't make it. Like, I'm counting the heads, calculating the average number of seconds, doing the multiplication in my barley, fogged mind. And I realize I can't make it. So I have to start solving the problems, just like Matt Damon did in that movie, right?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I know I can't make it to the front of the line, and I know I can't just pee my pants, right? Like, I'm an adult. At this time, I was like 28 years old. I'm like, but maybe if I can just pee a little bit, it'll relieve enough pressure so I can make it to the front of the line. So in a just superhuman feat, I was able to open and close the valve.
Oh boy.
Just enough, like maybe an ounce, to buy me enough time to make it to the front of the line. So,
and this is makes it to the top 5 coolest things you've ever done.
well, I didn't want you to be the only one with an endurance feat.
Oh, okay.
So no, I just decided to tell that story. It actually wasn't on my top 5, but it is now.
It is now. That's awesome. And you did it with success.
I did. I was very successful. Time dries all things.
That's the best line.
Yeah.
That can be our quote that goes on, when we pull out a quote from the episode.
Yeah.
Time dries all things.
We'll make a graphic out of that one.
That's
Chris
a meme.
Province.
Yeah.
Chris
Magic
Province.
in the Room episode.
So now I feel
74.
much closer to everyone that listens to the podcast because they know the time I peed my pants a little bit at the Chili Bowl. But you got to have a little bit in there because it was superhuman, I tell you.
Wow.
What do you got on that?
I don't know if I can top that.
No.
I don't know if I can. Okay, so my next one is a trip that I took with my family probably 5 years ago at this point. So we were able to take 2 months, and the nonprofit where I worked, after you had been there a certain amount of time, you could apply for a sabbatical. And so we did this sabbatical where we went across the country and we visited some other nonprofits that were similar, but also just had a lot of adventure along the way. And so we got a camper, and it was like a 10,000 mile trip. And in those 2 months, so I'm just going to run through kind of our stops. So we climbed Capulan Volcano in New Mexico. We stayed at a mountain in Casper, Wyoming, right outside of town there. We went to Grand Tetons for several days, Yellowstone for several days, where a huge male black bear walked like 10 feet from my wife and a couple kids at a picnic table while I was in the camper with the third one. And I looked out the window and I'm just like, I can't get to the bear spray. But he just kept going. He was happy. He was on his way down to Lake Yellowstone. and our campsite was on his way. So that was pretty awesome. Went to Bozeman for a little bit. Cycled up to the Highlight Reservoir. Highlight, yeah. So that was pretty cool. Coming down was terrifying. That was before
a winding road.
That was before disc brakes were a big thing on road bikes, and so you're there with caliper brakes going down a long incline. And I'm a big guy.
It's a steep canyon with a lot of turns.
Yeah, so I remember being scared and probably pretty conservative. So anyway, went to the hot springs there. That was awesome. Went to Glacier, saw bears all over the place, and then did this hike on a day that was crazy windy, and we were going upwind, so was afraid we were going to round a turn in the trail with my kids and run into a grizzly bear, because we had seen them kind of like within a mile of there, and then we're hiking upwind in this densely wooded trail to go see a waterfall, but we didn't see any bears. So these are just like visceral experiences that I remember. Stayed at Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, which is a beautiful place. Rode a Rails to Trails trail there on our bikes for a day. Went to the Olympic Peninsula, and man, Olympic National Park is incredible. You have alpine environments, you have rainforest, and then you have coastal environment with tide pools with starfish and anemones that you can touch, and these giant sea stacks, those big rock formations.
Going on the bucket list right now.
Yeah. Went to Crater Lake, went to the Redwoods, went to Zion in Utah. Did a 15-mile hike in Zion that ended with climbing, is it Angel Point? Something like Angel's Landing, that's what it's called, which don't ever do with kids. It's like terrifying.
Was it one day?
It's terrifying.
Did you do it in one day?
Yeah, wow. This was just a me thing. So we have this thing where if we go on a long trip like that, maybe once a week, like I'll go get dropped off somewhere and do something really long, just me.
And your beard.
I guess.
Your beard does it too.
The Angel's Landing thing, though, like you see it on videos and you see like teenagers and kids up there. Like, I don't know how more people don't die. It's crazy. The amount of people and the amount of no guardrails and steep, 1,000-foot falls. So anyway, and then went to Mesa Verde and got to do a tour where we went into the cliff dwellings with my kids, and then drove home. And that was 2 months, and it was incredible. And a really amazing experience, and just so much gratitude just for all those things.
So I hear the experiences that you had on that trip, and taken in a vacuum, any one of those things is pretty amazing. But I'm interested in, as you think about it more, looking back at a meta sort of analysis on that trip, what did you take away just as a father, as a husband, as a family? What did that time do? Or thinking back, what carries forward from there?
Yeah, so we have lots of stories from it. So it's a shared experience, so I'm gonna go to the work we do with Purpose and Performance Group. Oftentimes with teams, that's where we have to start. What's our shared experience? What's the thing that we've done together that is a shared narrative that bonds us? And for our family, we have this touchstone thing that we all experienced together. Everyone was there when the bear walked through our campsite. Yeah. Everyone was there when we, saw these things and did these things and experienced these things. Everyone did hard things. Everyone got tired of each other in the car. All that stuff. But my other big takeaway for me personally is that this was 2 months long. And it took a month for my mind to stop working in patterns influenced by my job. To think about checking email, to think about what was going on back at work, to think about upcoming items that I was responsible for, all of these kind of systemic structural influences on my life and who I was and how I showed up. And so after that first month, the systems that started influencing who I was were more like family dynamics, my role as a husband, my role as a father, how I wanted to show up in those roles versus how I wanted to show up as a leader in an organization.
That's awesome.
Now, like, does that stick when you come back to work? Like, no,
Right.
not 100%. But having that experience of completely changing your environment and your context and the systems that influence you, like my big takeaway when I came back was that the system is strong. That was kind of my theme for a while. The system is strong. And if I was going to come back and be a different person, which I wanted to, and I kind of always want to be a different person, right? We always want to grow and change, right? But I knew that I had to be very intentional about the systems that I was placing myself in and how I designed those systems.
Right.
And I don't think I understood that to that extent before that trip and really changing the system that I was in for a while.
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of pull that key theme as especially as we look towards next season and think about intentional leadership. That whole idea of like building structures and like building structures that allow us to show up as the person we want to be. You know, that's a cornerstone of the approach. But you know, having that realization and you know, I think that's one of the beautiful things about it's okay to be in a false environment. Like this isn't the environment I'm in every day, and that's the point. It lets me to connect with something else differently.
Right.
So if we kind of find ourselves yearning for that connection to something else, I think it's okay to break out of the environment you're in or the system that you're in and just create some space to connect with that thing.
Well, I'd say that's why offsites are important. Like that's why we design experiences with our clients that we serve the way we design them. And you know, I think we get trapped in this thought as leaders sometimes that like, oh, I'm going to do a retreat, or oh, I'm going to do an offsite, or oh, I'm going to whatever, and that's going to fix stuff. But it doesn't. The ongoing system change is what really changes behavior. And so we have to realize, one, we need that offsite or we need that retreat to break pattern, to change mindset, to change beliefs, and let people see something from a different perspective. And then we have to change things structurally going forward. Whether that's, we have this standing agenda on a meeting where every week we're talking about the trust level of our team. That's something that structurally it lives on the agenda. We always give 15 minutes to it a week. That can systemically change that team in a way that you can't do in a one-off one-day event or half-day event. So that's the kind of stuff that, like, when I apply this thinking, sorry, we're nerding out a little bit. That's not the point of this episode. But when I apply it, it's like, yes, you need the time away to break your thinking or to change it, give you insight, but then there has to be systemic change, or the system is going to be so strong that you're going to get sucked back into the same behaviors. And I think people don't understand the power of the systems that we're in.
Yeah, that's powerful. And you know, the conversations like we're having here today, it does become like once we share the experience of sharing these stories, like we're bonded differently. And so that's the idea, is to give, you know, listeners, not only for our benefit, learn something else about each other, but also the people that listen, a little tip and trick. Like, this is the type of exercise and the types of conversation that will bond your team, create environments of trust, and create, you know, effectively a better workflow.
Yeah.
So, Hannah, what's up? What's next on your list?
Well, so I've been debating whether to share this or not because, you know, I know people out there listening probably have different feelings about killing things. But I'm going to share it anyway. So when I, growing up, and I love animals. I still love animals. And
Everything you say before "but" is bullshit.
yes. I like to use "and" instead of "but."
Okay. Everything you say before that special "and" may also be.
No, I believe in protecting the environment and protecting life in general. And I used to want to be a wildlife photographer or a veterinarian. And, you know, to this day, I do have this love for anything in nature, right? And
That was it. For those listening,
and
everything before that, I mean, she's getting ready to invalidate.
Here we go.
I also went ahead and texted someone to be standing outside the door with a bucket of red paint later. So go ahead. We're prepared.
yeah, so my first fall in Oklahoma. So I'm fresh off the boat. Here's Hannah with, just arrived from Norway, and my hair was really long then, and I would wear it in braids. And a friend of mine and I decided that we were going to get our, do our hunter safety course and, get our hunting license for that year. And I had actually started working on that in Sweden the year before. I'd been living in Sweden before I moved to the States. And, but I didn't, there it's like an ongoing thing over several weeks, and I didn't finish it before I went back to Norway for the summer and then moved. So
you were pleased to find that all you had to do in Oklahoma was like a 30-minute...
Sign your name.
It was 8 hours on a Saturday.
Okay.
But so when my friend Wendy suggested doing this, I was like, yes, I already wanted to do this, right? So her brother and some buddies so we got our... we got certified and I went and did some target shooting and practiced with a gun, and I found that wasn't a terrible shot, actually. So we were gonna go hunting with Wendy's brother and some of his buddies, and it's opening season, it's doe day. So it's the first day of deer hunting season. And Wendy gets sick, so it's just me and 5 dudes that I don't really know very well. And so they hand me this gun that has 1 rifle shot and 1 shotgun pellet, and it's like a double barrel kind of thing. I've never seen a gun like that, but I was like, okay, so I have 1 shot, all right. And they put me up in this tree stand, and they're like, you can sit here. They're like, I don't know what they're thinking, but I don't think anybody had any serious expectations about my first day of hunting. So I'm up in the tree stand, and I see this deer walking up, and I've been wondering, how would I react if I saw a deer with a gun in my hands? I love animals, and I think deer are beautiful, and I see this deer, and this just cold-blooded focus just descended on me, and I'm like, you're going down. And I had my 1 shot. I shot it clean through the neck, and it ran for a few feet and then fell. And I was like, well, I just killed a deer. Now what do I do?
Right.
It's like lying on the ground. My buddies are a couple miles away, and I'm like, I'm gonna have to get it to the campsite. So I go and find it, and I'm like, well, how am I gonna get it out of here? Well, I guess I'm gonna have to drag it or something. So I pull it over my shoulders from the back legs, and I was like, dang, this is a lot heavier than I ever expected. And I'm hauling this deer for a couple miles through the woods, and I show up at the site with all the guys, and the looks on their faces when I walk out with a deer over my shoulder was priceless. I've never forgotten it. And, I guess nobody had expected. They were like, did you shoot that? And I'm like, yeah, I did.
That's what we're here to do, right?
I thought we were here to hunt.
And then, did you drag it out of the woods by yourself? And I'm like, yeah, what else was I gonna do?
Yeah, over my shoulder so somebody else could shoot it too.
But yeah, so I learned how to field dress it and, do all the things.
That's awesome.
for Thanksgiving that year, I mean, I do believe in, sustainably harvesting food. And I lived in the dorms at college at the time, so I didn't exactly know what to do with it, right? So I gave it to my friend's family, and they prepared it and invited me over for Thanksgiving. And,
Nice.
so I got to have venison for Thanksgiving, my first Thanksgiving in the States. So that was my first and only experience killing what I ate.
Deer killer.
Except
Wow.
for fish. I have done, I've gone fishing, but I've eaten fish that I caught, but
When you first started telling the story, I'm like, this is fall, it's Thanksgiving, because there's just not many Thanksgivings you don't see a deer hanging somewhere, right? But I think that's very Oklahoma. I mean, that's a
very
great
Oklahoma.
way to experience.
But it's also very Norway. I grew up in Norway. I come from a long line of farmers and hunters. In Norway, it's moose hunting. That's the big game. And now I live in Montana. Same thing, right? I mean, most people that live in Montana hunt, fish, harvest, cook, and utilize the land responsibly.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So the next one on my list, if it's not obvious, I've kissed the Blarney Stone. I mean, I think that should be pretty obvious.
How is it obvious?
Based on how lucky you are?
No, it's eloquence. It's the gift of eloquence.
Oh, really? Okay.
Clearly, yes.
So you traverse, half the countryside of Ireland to ultimately arrive at this castle, and you kind of go through the whole thing and crawl up to the top of this narrow tower and lean backwards and give it a smackaroo. And I think then you're gifted the eloquence for, I guess, whatever time you have left. So it's probably what's adding to my fame right now, and making me so popular. So. Yeah, it was something to just, Doug was stationed over there. He was stationed in Germany at the time, and another friend of ours, we flew and met in Dublin, and we did Dublin and Cork and Galwick and everywhere else over there, and just kind of made a time of it. And, I just figured you couldn't go to Ireland and not do the most touristy thing you could think of and kiss the Blarney Stone. So, I mean, it was exactly like you would expect it to be. Green everywhere, foggy, cold, misty, and climb up to the top of the castle, do your thing, and off you go. It's very, it's not very ceremonial. It's like they just have a guy there kind of spotting you so you don't fall down the hole, and and then it's like up and move on. But it's a neat thing. More than anything, it was about just traveling the countryside with Doug and Joe, and having, again, that shared experience and that time together, and being lost in a completely foreign country is an amazing experience. So,
wow.
As we, I asked you guys to bring a top 5, but it's been rich conversation. We got into takeaways and some leadership things. So what I want to do with this last kind of go around is just share the next 2 things on your list. Let's all share those 2 things, really quick order. And then let's pull thread. Let's pull thread on a couple of those ideas. So, Luke, what were the next 2 things you were going to share?
Next 2 things on my list are, I took a 4-day canoe trip, overnight canoe camping trip with one of my sons. After he had a hard year in school, we went and just disconnected, and it was amazing. That was the longest kind of canoe camping trip I had done, and just me and him in the wilderness. It was really cool.
Sounds awesome.
And then my last one, this is sort of it's probably not really top 5, but it's emblematic of the things that I love. And this one was with you, Chris. We were in Skokomish, Washington, and the salmon were running, and we walked to a little creek next to our hotel, and I reached in and pulled out like a 3-foot salmon by the tail with my bare hands, and I was just like, this is really cool.
Yeah. And he had on a stocking hat and a headlamp and a really full beard. It is probably the coolest picture.
I was wearing dress clothes.
Yeah, but I was talking from neck up.
Aside the dress clothes, you sound like
Yeah.
every Montana male there ever was,
Yeah.
holding a huge fish
Yeah.
with a big beard
And a headlamp. Yeah, I mean, it's a magical photo, and we might need to put that in the show notes.
I'm sure Chris was like, "Who brings a headlamp to go like do leadership workshops on site with a client?"
Exactly.
I'm like, "We're on the Olympic Peninsula.
Why wouldn't you?
Why would I not bring a headlamp so I can catch a fish out of the creek with my bare hands?"
I love, like, we talk about framing being a part of leadership. It's like, yes, we could call that a stream near our hotel, or we could call it a ditch. Like, I mean, it's all framing, right? What is your communications around it? But it was awesome. It was a stream, but there was a lot of them in there, and he was like Mr. Miyagi. He just.
That's
Well,
awesome.
I picked that one
I
because
wish I'd have seen that.
yeah, it's emblematic of just like experiencing things when we get the chance to.
Right.
And other things that came to mind were, what's the name of the town? There was a time that you, Bob, and I, Chris, were driving down Highway 1 or 101 or whatever it's called. And we were in that town that's right on it's where they filmed the Goonies.
Mm-hmm.
It's right in between on the Oregon-Washington border. But we went to this restaurant and they had a big plexiglass section of the floor, and there were sea lions underneath the floor of the restaurant.
Yeah.
And like we never knew that, but like we pulled in and tried this little place and spent 30, 45 minutes at this restaurant and tried to eat oysters again and thought they were disgusting again.
Still,
but like it's just those things that like the fish is emblematic of taking those opportunities to experience wherever we are. And
And
Yeah,
how can you
that's
say
my
that
story.
oysters are disgusting? They're delicious.
I try like once a year, Hannah. I keep thinking I'm going to find what the magic is, but I haven't yet. So,
Well.
Okay. So that's my last two.
Well, my first stories were from my late teens and early 20s, and so my last two are from more recent, adult experience. And one was definitely running my first half marathon. I never imagined that I would ever run for 2 hours and actually enjoy it. Kind of a little similar to the endurance story that you told, right? You train for it, so your body is prepared, and at the same time, there are like definitely times during that race where your mind wants to quit or it feels really painful. But then to be able to prove to yourself, first of all, that it's possible to do it and come out the other side and feeling that rush of, I just did that, right? That was one of my top experiences for sure. But prior to that, quitting my corporate job and starting a business, that was probably, I think, one of the coolest things I've ever done. And that's also a little bit similar. It has some fear and some pain and some hard times and some, experiences that feel very uncertain sometimes, but just continuing on that path and then being able to connect with you guys. So, if I were to pull up another, because why stick to only 5, but
Right.
going through the organizational dynamics program at University of Oklahoma and connecting with you two, again, not knowing what that was going to lead to a decade or so later, but here we are sitting in the studio today and we're doing really meaningful work together. So those are kind of related in my mind, right? Even though they were events that happened far apart, but going through that educational experience, connecting with you guys, then me stepping out on my own and recognizing we could all join forces and that's one of my top most meaningful experiences.
Yeah, and I think in that, when we talk about whether it's grad school, the bonds that we form there, executing and running a business together, like it's all the things. It's fear, it's pain, it's endurance, it's joy. just being neurotic about not having to get another corporate job, like especially if you're a bad employee like I am. Yeah, you know, like I don't know where I'd land. It's you know, it's this idea of like experiencing the dynamics that we get to experience, and you know, helping those organizations and help, you know, just I kind of look at my story and I say, man, I'm so much better at supporting people that are in organizations versus doing within them. And I have to believe that has a ton of value. And then the work that we do, you know, I think about, you know, we got to follow that salmon run up to go, and we got to see the king salmon run after, you know, after the one that Luke was talking about. So seeing the salmon runs and the sea lions and the Oregon coast, or like wherever we're at, I mean, there's so much richness, whether you're in Upper Lake, California, or Florence, Oregon, or Tokeland, Washington, or Seattle, or like wherever we go, there's so many rich stories kind of waiting to be explored, and developing those shared experiences as we move through. And that's not only with the geography of the places we go, but it's also the people that we get to connect with. And you know, that was really one of my shares, is like kind of the whole the journey of grad school into entrepreneurship, and how we go about our daily life, and you know, just hugely important. And so because I started with the championship thing, I'll end with one. Getting to see the Jordan, Pippen, Rodman Bulls play, like during their kind of record-breaking season, that was penultimate. It kind of calls back everything to me that was about those formative years and what champions really look like. And I enjoy any time that I'm able to watch someone that is a master of their craft, whether it's a musician, a sports team. I can just sit back and think, just appreciate how excellent they are. And you know, for me, and I, you know, and for us, it's how we approach every day. It's really being subject to the discipline that we choose for our career, and being the best we possibly can at it. And when I see folks display it that way, it models the way. You know, you understand that work ethic and the type of commitment required, and hopefully it leads us forward. But as we wrap, I want to wrap with this. Why is it good for us to talk about these things? Like, why is this exercise meaningful? I'd like to hear your guys' take on that.
As I've been kind of absorbing all these stories, you know, the thread that goes through it for me is there's this quality of living in the moment and engaging with what's right in front of you. And I think these are the stories that rise to the top for us. Is like when I was there and I just grabbed that salmon, or we decided on a whim to do this thing, or I'm moving across the country and I'm so present and mindful of the experience that's happening. I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know where it's going to lead, but I'm fully here right now. And I do think when we engage with life in that way, when we engage with the people in our lives, and we show up as our fully present selves, I think we can shape our experiences and the experiences for those we lead and for those we're in community with in a very different way, right? Than if we're just going through the motions and doing, you know, getting stuck in the ruts of life.
Yeah, I'll take it to, you know, the thread that I saw is that would you want your leader to not have stories like this? And I think for people who are wanting to lead, just to realize it's unrealistic to lead people into meaningful experience if you don't have them yourself.
Right.
And if you can't take advantage of the moment, if you can't do something like going and kissing the Blarney Stone, or being an immigrant and being like, yeah, I'm going to go shoot a deer as the only, you know, woman or whatever. Yeah. Like, those are the things that you need a leader to be open to. if an organization is going to continue to evolve, and if you are going to expect the people in it to have meaningful experiences like that. And I know they're not always around travel and doing, funny, weird things or whatever, but these experiences kind of echo in our day-to-day, hey guys, let's go learn about this thing, or let's go visit another company and see what we can find there, and let's get lunch along the way. And I think we all want to be a part of places and cultures where we can have some of these opportunities to learn, opportunities to master things, challenges to rise to. And my encouragement to leaders is that if you are only in the grind all the time, it's going to be really hard for you to lead your organization into a place where, as a team and you as an individual and the leaders underneath you, are all kind of living life to its fullest potential.
Yeah, and that's my takeaway. Like, life is rich. Spotting those moments, and I think that a charge of leaders is, when you look around a room, someone has to bring some fun.
Yeah.
Someone's got to bring that spirit of connection. And if me, you, whoever, if we're discharging that obligation to someone else, then we're managing. Because leading requires us to, look at life as rich, the power of positive potential, and how we connect with one another to get there. So, what a great conversation. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate you guys. Love learning more about you, where you've been, and your personal journey. So, I think that's why we say win the day, because it's about right now.
Yeah.
And so let's go do that. Let's go win today and do this again sometime soon.
Yeah.
And for you guys, if you want to connect with us, reach out to us at purposeandperformancegroup.com. Hit us up on LinkedIn, Facebook, any other social media outlet. We'd love to talk to you more about how to create connection within your organization and maybe have a conversation similar to this.
Hey everybody, Luke here again. Thanks for listening to today's episode. Just wanted to remind you again that there's an opportunity for you to get a free Magic in the Room hat if you go to magicintheroom.com and complete a survey to help us make this podcast better for you. That's what we want to do. So go and enter some information, including your address, and we will send you that hat, and are really excited to hear what feedback you have for us. Hope that you have a great day and that you can go out there as a courageous leader and make some magic in your own rooms that you're a part of. We'll talk to you later.